It's Monday, the 23rd of August, 2021. Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Headlines, the business news you need in just 5 minutes. I'm Sean Aylmer. And if 5 minutes isn't enough, then find more news and interviews in our longer daily podcast called Fear and Greed. In today's headlines, Prime Minister Scott Morrison changes direction, telling Australians that they'll need to live with COVID rather than expect it to be eradicated. Plus, Sydney Airport forecasts a strong pickup when people are finally allowed to travel again. Confidence among home buyers takes a tumble, and why wearing masks has been a boon for hearing implant group Cochlear. Our lead story today, the federal government has sided with New South Wales and accepted that it's highly unlikely that Australia will ever return to zero COVID cases, conceding that the Delta variant probably can't be eradicated. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the focus needs to shift to minimising hospitalisation rates rather than cases. The comments came as New South Wales recorded 830 community transmitted cases yesterday, following 825 on Saturday. Mr. Morrison said you can't live with lockdowns forever, and once vaccination rates got to 70% and eventually 80%, lockdowns would do more harm than good. He said at those vaccination rates, Australia needed to start living with COVID-19. People who are vaccinated will get more freedoms sooner than people who are not. The tide is turning on living with COVID. While some, such as Western Australia's Mark McGowan, insist that zero eradication should be the goal, others, notably Ms Berejiklian and now Mr Morrison, are becoming much more pragmatic. Undoubtedly, Labor states, including Victoria, are getting antsy about New South Wales's approach. There's also growing concerns about the toll the lockdowns are taking on mental health across the country. The moral of it all? Get vaccinated, get vaccinated, get vaccinated. In overseas news, weekly COVID cases in the US exceeded 1 million last week for the first time since the height of the pandemic. Media reports in Japan say that some Olympic venues might be converted into field hospitals to cope with the growing number of cases. Thousands protested in France over the weekend about lockdowns, and the United Kingdom will this week make available antibody tests to better understand how many vaccinated and previously infected people are still catching the virus. The COVID crisis continues to dominate the globe. The price of iron ore tumbled late last week, with the commodity dropping nearly 15% on Friday to below $150 a tonne. 3 months ago, it hit a record $237 a tonne. Concerns about slower economic growth, particularly in China, sent several commodities lower, including oil, copper and other metals. But the slump in iron ore has surprised analysts, given the economic data out of China remains solid, if not spectacular. The falling price will hit economic growth and the budget bottom line in Australia. For every $10 a tonne decrease, tax receipts will fall by $1.3 billion. And one of Europe's most wanted criminals, Raffaele Imperiale, has been arrested after many years on the run. The Italian mafia cocaine trafficker, known as the Van Gogh boss for having 2 stolen paintings by the Dutch master, was arrested in Dubai, and Italian police said he was a leading exponent of international drug trafficking and money laundering, according to a report in the Financial Times. Locally, Sydney Airport, which last week knocked back a $30.3 billion bid from a consortium of mostly superannuation funds, said it had lost $97 million for the 6 months to the end of June, as international borders remained closed. Total passenger numbers were down 36% compared to a year earlier. International passengers pay higher fees than domestic travellers, so the border closures have hit particularly hard. But Chief Executive Jeff Colbert said people would be very keen to fly once restrictions were lifted. I think he's right. The national auction clearance rate fell to its lowest level in a year over the weekend, though there's some big differences between Sydney and Melbourne. The clearance rate for capital cities across the nation was 63.3%, according to CoreLogic. The rate in Sydney, where private inspections are still allowed, was more than 80%, whereas in Melbourne it was less than 50%, and the total number of sales was down. Last week, REA Group said new property listings were down 10% nationally during July. Demand remains high, it's just that there's not as much stock on the market. One of the consequences of lockdowns and mask wearing is that more people are realising they have poor hearing because they can't read lips. As a result, sales of Cochlear's hearing implants have surged, and the group posted a big jump in underlying profit for the last financial year, though it didn't quite meet investor expectations. And the number of companies on the ASX 200 with a target of net zero emissions has tripled over the past year, according to a survey by the Australian Council of Superannuation Investors. There are now 49, up from 14, and the list includes Commonwealth Bank, ANZ, National Australia Bank, Rio Tinto and BHP, according to a report in the Financial Review. That's the Fear and Greed business headlines for today. Make sure you hit follow so you get it every morning and search for our longer daily podcast called Fear and Greed. We also release a daily interview. Today we're looking at investing in retailers on the ASX. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter, or go to fearandgreed.com.au. I'll be back later with the afternoon market report. I'm Sean Aylmer. Have a great day.